let's imagine for like, let's say 4 days, 5 days, for some reason, there's no power in your hostel, there's no power in your house, and you can't pump water. And then you get to pump water like after the fourth day. So like power comes back. So usually, when you open the tap, what happens? It's dirty water that comes out first, right? Then as the tap continues flowing and flowing, the water becomes what? Pure. We're here to talk about creating. So that's one analogy of creating. Like I said, I'm a singer-songwriter, but I feel like everything I'm going to say here would apply to everybody, irrespective of your field. Like they say, practice makes what? Perfect. So good. The more times I do stuff, some people call it iteration, right? The more times I do stuff, practice makes perfect. It means there's a tendency for me to get better with every design. If I design a dress today, I design a dress tomorrow, next tomorrow, the day after, and the day after. There's a tendency that I'm going to become better. If I don't become better, there's a probability that my village people are following me. But that's by the way. So I met someone recently. Every time she listens to music or music comes on in the room, she just starts dancing. For some reason, I'm just like, oh wow, why are you just dancing regardless of who is there? And she just keeps dancing. And you know what that really taught me? I've noticed that most of the times when we are creating, what do architects do when they are laying a plan? Or what do architects do when they design, right? Yeah, okay. So when you're designing, whatever you're doing, there's a tendency for us to focus more on the outcome. So in the case of the girl dancing, regardless of who is in the room, she could have focused on the outcome and be like, oh, what are people going to say if they see me just randomly? I mean, just imagine yourself standing up and you're just dancing here. The first thing I'm going to think about is like, oh, okay, what are people going to say? And that there is outcome rather than the event of actually dancing, which is process. Are you feeling my analogy? Exactly. So that's what creativity sometimes entails. It's us delving into the process, into the action of becoming better and better, rather than just the outcome. I believe that such a great way to look at it is the fact that, so for me, for example, every song I've written, I've not necessarily cared about, how many people are going to like the song. Do not get me wrong, I have the fear of rejection, but what I would rather do while creating is focus on the work. Because when I'm focusing on the work, at least I have the power in that regard, right? I necessarily cannot control your reaction, but I can control my action, right? But I can control my action in creating. So like I said, practice what makes perfect. Great work sometimes looks like editing. Now, what should creativity look like? What should it feel like? What should it be like? Sometimes it can look like you taking a walk. Sometimes it can look like you pulling from your subconscious knowledge. Sometimes it can be you in your room writing your next song. This is what it is like. Our being, as God has designed it, is to exist in creativity. Everything we do. Before these chairs that you're sitting on were made, there was creativity. In the idea or in the sense of, there's a problem. If people are going to stand for so long, their backs are going to ache, their legs are going to lay. So there has to be like a higher connection to your being and to your creator. So everybody here is a creative. And trust me, it doesn't have to look like some form of ritual. Sometimes it just looks like you being just yourself and then embracing it in whatever way it would look like. So let me give you an example. You know when like a pastor is preaching and then he gives one punchline, but nobody responds. Then he's like, oh my God, you guys didn't hear that. I said, but you guys heard it. But you just didn't respond. Now, let's talk about longevity. You as a creative, you have to look at what is in front of you rather than what's just ahead. So it starts like what is in front of you at the very moment. Before I lose my train of thoughts. So here's what I'm trying to say. Let's say today I pick up my laptop to write a code and then maybe it doesn't look successful. I pick up my laptop the next day to write another code. It doesn't look successful. There are two things I could do. And I'll use this simple analogy. I could close the book, or I could close the chapter. Closing the chapter means that whether my endeavor was successful today or not, it doesn't determine my next step. It means I can open another chapter tomorrow, right? But if I close the book, what happens? That's the end of the story. And I'm sure you guys have heard this analogy many times of what consistency and creativity can look like. It does not have to be perfect. I put out my first single in 2016. It took me another 4 years to put out another single, 2020, then 2021, 2022, 2023. Between 2016 and 2020, nothing necessarily happened. I was just putting out music, and then some people latched onto it, some people didn't latch onto it. But what happens from 2020 to 2024 is that I put out multiple bodies of work, and then that consistency takes the trajectory higher. I'm sure most of you here would have started listening to me from 2020, right? Why? Because I wasn't doing anything before that. That's why. And sometimes it would shock you to know that the more you create, the more there is to create. Somebody write that down. I'm preaching. So the more you create, there becomes more to create. So let's say the first day does not work, but you can keep going, because guess what? It only gets better. Peradventure, it doesn't get better. Iteration comes in. Editing comes in. Why is this not working? Why does this feel like it's not this? You cannot necessarily just focus on the outcome. It is your choice to focus on the process. The more you create, there becomes more to create. And I'm going to end with that. Thank you very much.